Aid. But specifically, we're going to also learn how Bayer is leading the way to create a paradigm shift in the industry, one that I believe is redefining the normal way of conducting trials in our industry going forward. But first, I want to introduce our panelists. Let's start with Lori Warrens and Josh Kravitz. They are from MedSurplus Alliance, a program of the Task Force for Global Health. MedSurplus Alliance is a cross-sector alliance that works collaboratively to improve access to quality donated medical products through standards, accreditation, capacity building, management, and technology solutions and leadership. Laurie actually serves as the director for MedSurplus Alliance. Her career has focused on connecting underserved communities to essential human services and resources. She has served as the executive director of the Partnership for Quality Medical Donations, the Alliance of Information and Referral Systems, and as a senior director at VisionLink. Laurie is best known for developing 211, an easy-to-remember telephone number that connects people across North America and human services and volunteer opportunities in their community. Josh serves as the Kits for Life coordinator, helping sponsors and MSROs, medical surplus recovery organizations, structure, pilot, and scale their donation relationships. He formerly served as the first chief operating officer for MedShare, a medical surplus recovery organization, where he successfully managed the organization's response to Haiti's 2010 earthquake. He also served as the CEO for Dispensary of Hope, building it into one of the U.S.'s largest charitable medication distributors. Next, we have Georgia Winson, who has served as the President and Executive Director of Hospital Sisters Mission Outreach for the past 10 years. Mission Outreach works closely with major health systems to secure, process, and distribute quality medical donations that impact the health of people around the world. Georgia's success in nonprofit management has identified her as an innovative leader with a wealth of experience in building collaborative networks in the fields of public health advocacy, developmental disability services, and international medical supply distribution. She also currently serves as the chairperson for the Leadership Council of the MedSurplus Alliance. And from Bayer, I'm proud to introduce Donna Liberty Cook and Mark Ryan. Bayer is one of our founding members, and like I said, I'm very proud to say that. Donna has a very background in the pharma industry, beginning with public policy work and moving into clinical operations. She has been with Bayer's clinical development organization for over 6 years and in her current role is the director of global contracting and budget. Part of this role includes her work as the project lead for Kits for Life. She also shares the site pharma onboarding workstream for the Kits for Life Advisory Council. Head of the Site Management Americas, both oversee clinical operations for Bayer. Mark has worked in the pharma industry for over 25 years. While most of his time he has been spent in clinical operations, he's also spent some time working on process re-engineering. Mark is currently Vice President, Head of Site Management Americas region. His oversight includes Canada, the US, Latin America. His group is responsible for all phase 1 and phase 3 clinical trials across various therapeutic areas, including cardiovascular, women's healthcare, and oncology. Besides his focus on clinical trials, he sponsored Kit for Life initiative at Bayer. Again, I'd like to welcome our panelists, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Greg.
Hey, Greg.
Got quite a few questions already, and we do have some initial questions. One of the things that really impacts me every time I see the video that everyone was very fortunate to see, it made me very proud, or makes me very proud and thankful to be part of an industry that is trying to close the healthcare gap for underserved individuals throughout the world. I'm very curious to know, Donna and Mark, how you guys came across Kits for Life and why.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I'll take the first part of this, and then Donna will kind of jump in afterwards. You know, for Donna and I, we both saw and learned about Kits for Life at the Society for Clinical Research site conference. And we were both attending and sitting in the audience. And when we saw the presentation that you and your team gave on Kits for Life, I think we both looked at one another and just said, if we're not doing this, we have to do it right now. And we both really kind of were on the same page instantaneously that this is something we need to be involved with. And, on behalf of Bear, but also personally, I think both of us have a personal, real love for what this is all about and how we should move it forward. So when we left that conference, I think it was 2019, that when we left that conference, we came back and really dove in head first and really tried to move our organization to support the project. And since we've come back and introduced it, we have only received positive feedback and an overwhelming abundance of support, I guess I would say.
Thanks, Mark. And hey, Donna, what kind of feedback did you get from your employees in terms of the corporate citizenship?
Oh, I have to say, I had to cross collaborate with a lot of different functional roles, and I was getting immediate feedback. It was certainly a learning curve for myself in terms of corporate donations and just understanding how they work so we could vet everything properly. But it was such wonderful collaboration to the fact that we were able to implement this in just under 9 months at Bear. Which is a big feat in and of itself with such a large organization as Bear. And I have to tell you, the momentum keeps going. I mean, I have people from the different countries that are reaching out to me that are now very interested because we did put together a blueprint for the countries outside the US, how to engage with a nonprofit, and kind of gave them all the steps. And we already vetted the process. So that nobody's reinventing the wheel per se, but just having to deal with their local vetting. And it hasn't stopped since day one, in terms of the feedback and the communications that have gone out. We know that people are reading them. So it's been thrilling. It's been a thrilling ride, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. When I first had the idea, someone came up to me and was very candid. They said, "Greg, this idea is bigger than you, but it's not bigger than a lot of organizations, and a lot of organizations who can provide, actually who share the vision and mission, but also can provide the subject matter experts." One of the things that's fascinated me over the last 2 to 3 years as this has been in development is the relationships that have occurred. I mean, relationships that I didn't think I would ever see sometimes as sponsor to sponsor. I'm from a large site in Southern Indiana here in the United States. And, sponsors sometimes they compete for sites and for recruitment of patients in that. But to see the relationships between sponsors and sponsors, the relationships that I'm seeing foster between and strengthening between the sponsors and the sites, from other organizations on this call are represented, the MSA, Medical Surplus Alliance, relationships that they have with their accredited medical surplus recovery organizations. And then also especially between the MSROs and the recipient organizations, humanitarian aid organizations. So I would like to walk through those relationships. And if you guys could give me your feedback on those, I want to start with, again, let's see, with Donna and Mark. Bayer is one of 5 pharma companies that are serving as founding members of Kits for Life. They are joined by Janssen, Eli Lilly, Sanofi, and Roche, plus other cross-sector collaborating organizations such as Sanofi Foundation, Covan, Society for Clinical Research Sites. Can you walk us through how that collaboration is occurring or has occurred using Kits for Life with other pharma companies?
Yeah, Greg, thanks. I couldn't agree with you more regarding the fact that, I know those 5 founding pharma companies working together on the advisory board, and really, it really is amazing, because I think you said it earlier that, pharma companies compete. We are competing to get drugs to patients faster, as fast as we can through the clinical trial process. But since we've started with this initiative for Kits for Life, this is one of the truly amazing things about this initiative is how willing everybody is to work together, right? And I think that's one of the amazing pieces. And in my mind, I do think this is one of the things that we need to continue to work together to make it a bigger success. And I've said before, I feel like this just needs to become a part of our everyday process in how we do clinical trials. No different than we collect adverse events for a clinical trial. This should be just standard practice of what we do with our clinical supplies when we're either done with the process or a study or things are expiring, that we repurpose them as best we can, utilizing this, the Kids for Life system.
And Greg, I was just going to comment on the relationship with Lori, Josh, and Georgia. Just learning about the Medical Surplus Recovery Organization was brand new for me in this whole industry that's out there. And Lori and Josh had shared with me at one time, combined, the two of them probably have 40 plus years of experience in this space. But with your idea, Greg, these were supplies that they weren't even aware about.
Right.
And that really hit home for me, and it astounded me. I said, wow, working together, we can leverage all that and do really have some impact on global health. And the second point I was going to make was in terms of the relationships again. Covance is on the advisory council, and one of the two large studies we used for the pilot had not just lab kits, but these UACR analyzers, but they're need to be married up with test strips. So we were able to peg them for donation, but hospital sisters came back and said, Donna, this needs a consumable. We really need test strips before we can give these to our humanitarian organizations. I said, all right, let me approach Covance and see if they could give them to you at a discount because you're a nonprofit. Well, Covance came back and said, we're going to donate the test strips. And I think that is just a wonderful example of the relationship with all of the partners. And again, it's non-competitive. This is like everybody wants to work together because they know that there is, it's all for an ultimate wonderful goal.
Yeah, that's excellent. And your interactions, I wasn't familiar with Laurie or Josh either. And back even with the idea, I thought, well, heck, if we can get, instead of my staff, they're at the research center destroying these supplies, and God loving those nurses, every day they would say, Greg, we have to destroy another 15, 20 kits. Another 50 kits. Can't we do something with these kits? In fact, many of the supplies were not expired. And that's why I said, well, if we can get them in hand of humanitarian aid organizations, but that's a lot easier said than done. And then came across Lori and her team and started understanding that there already is an international distribution platform in place for medical supplies, getting the right medical supplies in the right hands for the right reason. And that's where I think the relationship between Med Surplus Alliance, Lori's team, and George's team, the Med Surplus Recovery Organizations, especially the accredited ones, where those recipient organizations, and I didn't think about this when, early on, is that those recipient organizations deserve and have the right to supplies that are safe, that they can use, just like we have, in our communities. And that's something that MSA helped me better understand. So, Laurie, if I could, I'll pause and I'll let you describe MSA, what they do, because you guys play a crucial role in assuring sponsors those supplies are protected and they're getting in the right hands for the right reason. And if you could kind of walk us through MSA as well as the relationship that you have with your accredited MSROs, similar to hospital sisters.
Thanks, Greg. The Med Surplus Alliance was created in 2012. We're coming up on our 10-year anniversary soon. I can't quite believe that. We were created really to try to help advance practices that would improve the quality of donations overall, medical product donations overall, so that those donations would benefit the patient and the recipient first and foremost, and second, to help protect the environment. And at the time, we really thought the best way to do that was to create an alliance and programs that engage stakeholders, cross-sector stakeholders in partnerships committed to figuring out how do we advance those practices, those quality practices, how do we identify what they are first and then advance them, and then how do we create standards-based programs and practices that could be implemented on a very large scale, like Kids for Life, or on a very small scale, like church mission trips that might be going and conducting medical mission trips. And so as it relates to Kids for Life, I was delighted to meet Greg and hear about this program. And Don is absolutely right. We had never thought about clinical research sites and the possibility of partnering with them. And so I'd say we have two main roles when it comes to Kids for Life, both the ongoing activities and the success of it. First and foremost is we're committed to, and our primary role is to help develop and promote standards that will ensure voluntary standards and that are developed with national experts across a variety of sectors, but all with experience and understanding about medical product donations. And so we create the standards, and it's called the Code of Conduct. And it's to provide some guidance and direction to organizations to understand how do my organization, my activities best adhere with World Health Organization guidelines for medical product donations and also best practices. And but just as important and maybe more important is we manage an accreditation program that Greg referred to. And that program basically documents the capacity of a medical surplus recovery organization to adhere both to the Code of Conduct, but also World Health guidelines, and to provide some support and capacity building, when it's needed. We also provide some education and networking opportunities. So the first is to provide a framework that donors like Bear and others can turn to say, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't necessarily have the resources to vet all these organizations or understands all the rules that apply. So what's that seal of approval we can look for that can give us some guidance and also limit our liability risk as well, because that work is being done by others and can help benefit our program. So that's probably number one, is doing our best to provide a framework and advance quality donation practices. The second is to develop these, as I mentioned, standards-based donation programs. What we've learned is having standards is the first step. Accrediting is the second step. But for most organizations, it still requires extra support to be able to implement a program. So we've tested, and we have available that what we're using with Kids for Life is a process for implementing a system-wide approach to standard product donations. So as part of that, we can offer tools. For example, some online tools that can facilitate the work. We can provide support with developing models and onboarding. And our role with the MSROs is to help coordinate and bring that all together so that as a donor, you don't have to work, unless you want to, don't have to work necessarily with 7 different organizations and develop a plan with each. We have a plan that the MSROs have built together and can be implemented. And so our role at MSA is to help coordinate that, again, try to save some time and energy, reduce risk, and where we can to provide support that one organization can't do alone. So we collect and aggregate data and provide that in reports. And we also collect stories that can be shared. And as part of the task force, we also share information that we're learning about global health and development priorities and opportunities, and sharing the Kids for Life story with the rest of our organization. So standards and accreditation, providing a roadmap for implementing a program across a large organization, and then communicating and coordinating as best we can is what we're focused on.
Great, thank you so much. Georgia, Lori had referenced the relationship between MSA and how important it is with the MSROs. Can you take us through the process? First, number one, what is a medical surplus recovery organization, as well as your relationship with MSA, but then more important is your relationship with what I've come known as the recipient organizations, the humanitarian aid organizations, And I think right now, Kits for Life have actually distributed clinical trial supplies into 8 different countries. So if you could walk us through that.
Sure. And Greg, I think you really hit it on the head when you talked about relationships. Hospital Sisters Mission Outreach is a medical surplus recovery organization. We were developed in 2002 by the Hospital Sisters of St. Francis. And the sisters really had, feet in both worlds. They run a health system here in the U.S., and they understand that there is surplus that can be donated to low resource countries, but they also ran health facilities in Tanzania and Haiti, and they were able to see firsthand what it looks like when medical product donations go wrong. And it is not pretty. If you don't do this right, you put a burden on people that you're hoping to serve. So, the standards developed by the Med Surplus Alliance, we were real excited when this began to develop, because we knew in order to have really good relationships with the people we serve, the recipient organizations, that we needed to be accountable. And that we needed to be able to have back and forth interchange. We needed to communicate with each other to meet one another's needs. So it's a perfect fit. And I love the Kits for Life program and this work with Bear, because it is actually broadening our reach. It's helping more people understand the importance of accreditation, the importance of developing a relationship and developing relationships at every facet of the donation stream. So with mission outreach, part of our relationship development with our recipients is, first we do a comprehensive needs assessment, and we really try and get an in-depth picture of what does this organization look like? What type of services do they provide? What kind of constraints are they working under? Do they have adequate electricity? Do they have adequate water? Do they have adequate storage for the donation that they're requesting? All of these things really go into making sure that you make a quality donation. And then following that needs assessment, if the group determines that they are interested in moving forward with a donation, we have a series of consultation calls. And that's with our logistics specialist and inventory specialist, Vicki Detmers. But then we also include Ratish Kumar, who is our master's level biomedical engineer. And he's available to really consult on what types of devices and equipment are sent. I think probably Donna, Ratish is the one who said, boy, we need those test strips.
Yes, he was.
Yes, yeah. And so, both Vicki and Ratish work very closely with our recipients to make sure that we match the donations and the items we have available to their need. And we work through the entire logistics process, work through freight forwarders and others to make sure that the shipping is executed without any problems. And then we do follow-up evaluations. We have multiple mission outreach, probably about, if any given year, about 48% of the organizations we serve are repeat customers. And that says something to us about the quality. And, it says something about the relationships that we've developed. And, I've had nothing but really positive responses for the donations we've received from Kits for Life. And one thing that's kind of interesting, our relationships and our relationship building is primarily with the recipient organizations. We've now served 95 countries and sent about 85 million in product. But we also have very deep relationships with organizations like Bear and Kids for Life, but also with, probably more than 100 hospitals throughout the Midwest. And one of the things that you'll be probably pleased to know is during the COVID crisis, some of the items from Kits for Life were actually used and given to laboratories here in the US because people were running short on supplies. So it's very rare that the US experiences the kind of scarcity we did during COVID, but it was a blessing to be able to have things to help out people locally. And our local hospitals that received product from us during the height of the pandemic here are just blessing us like crazy. They are sending product to us now, knowing that we're serving in India and we're serving in South America. So I agree with you that people love this kind of program. And to me, it speaks to the fact that people do want to do good. People want to find a way to help. So I'm grateful that you guys have found this really innovative way to help.
Oh, thank you, Georgia. And we're glad you are you and doing what you're doing and making it easier for us from the site's perspective to to repurpose those supplies and process them that that um, that meet the standards of the sponsors that we work with. And one of the processes is what we call delinking. Can Georgia or Lori, can you walk us through the delinking process? Because I know we probably have a lot of sponsors on the phone. I'm not on, on the call today, on the event, asking, okay, if when I donate those supplies, because coming from a research site, we know there's proprietary information on those supplies, on the kits boxes. There's names, there's study information. That's that process is currently a huge burden on a site, and that's what we experienced. I mean, we estimated anywhere from 5 to 8 hours of staff time just to break down the kits, remove all that proprietary information, and now, which is amazing, is the MSROs like yours used as volunteers to do that and follow those certain standards and processes. So really, from a site's perspective, you make our job so easy just to package them, put them in a box, and send them to you.
Well, and I'll share some info and then I'll let Lori jump in. So you're right. During a typical year, and we're rebuilding after COVID-19, during a typical year, Mission Outreach has about 18,000 volunteer hours per year. And so we have the equivalent about 8 full-time equivalents that are come from our volunteer corps. And when we get the donations from the sites, we have specific volunteers that sit down. They, take the kind of deconstruct the kits. They sort them out into unique items, and then they remove the barcodes. They remove any labeling. They make sure that nothing is left that really would tie this back to the donor organization. And that's really part of the liabilities protection as well that medical surplus recovery organizations and the MSA with their accredited MSROs. That's part of our service that we're providing. And a related issue is, when we get biomedical equipment, we make sure that, we sweep the hard drives and that obviously that there's no patient information left on that equipment. We make sure we take all the labels off for any equipment or supplies that are given to us by any donor. So it's an important part of the liability, and our volunteers love working on these projects. So thank you for that.
The only thing I would just add is this, what Greg refers to as delinking is important for many reasons, but I think one that stands out for me is that the medical surplus recovery organizations, the process they use is what we'd call a pull system in terms of what is sent to a recipient organization in whatever country is, requesting this, is determined by what they need and what they want and what they request. And so it's important to be able to take the product that comes in and turn it over to the MSROs to then make decisions about where it can best be used. And so delinking is part of that as well, so that we're not making donations based on donor designations, which may or may not line up with what a recipient needs and wants or what a country's trying to accomplish in building their health system. And so that's an important reason why it's a foundational principle for what we do.
Thanks, Lori. Now, Josh, you've been waiting patiently. Josh makes it all real. Josh is our coordinator for Kids for Life. I call him our wizard. He helps develop and strengthen and outline the relationships between the sponsor and MSA, as well as the sponsor and the MSROs. And that's so, Josh, for as the tires hit the road now, we've had a couple of neat pilots. One in particularly is Bayer just finished a pilot that involved over 200 research centers throughout the U.S. And if you could take us through that pilot, number one, and again, those clinical trial supplies came from the sites. And then I'm going to ask you then about some bulk supplies that sponsors also have the opportunity to do. So if you could take us through this first pilot that I'm proud to say was a huge success. I'm just so pleased.
Well, thanks for asking the question, Greg. The pilot stage is so incredibly exciting because it's when we're able to grow a whole nother set of relationships within the program that really pushes everything forward. So we start out by identifying and working with the champions at each one of the sponsors that are joining the Kids for Life program. In this case, we had Mark and Donna that were incredibly enthusiastic, and we had the opportunity to sit down with them and talk about the program in detail. How is it going to work? And what will this pilot look like? And from that conversation, they were able to start to identify what is the broader team that will be needed in order to implement the Kids for Life program within their organization. And they just did a fantastic job with that and very creative in pulling together people from throughout Bayer that we don't always think about when we're launching a nonprofit program, but they had the foresight to think about, oh, we're going to need the communications people because we have a large organization. We need to package this information really succinctly and get it out so that way we have not only the right enthusiasm, but folks know what's going to be expected of them. So once we did that, we were able to sit down with the team and talk about, what are Bayer's goals for this pilot, for the larger, their larger vision in their involvement with Kids for Life. And, through that process, we're able to ensure that we have some really solid alignment with the principles of the MedSurplus Alliance donation standards, the code of conduct. And the advantage there is making sure we're all walking toward the same global health outcome. In this case, we want to enhance healthcare delivery for our most vulnerable neighbors. And through these conversations, we're able to make sure that we're all on that same page and we're all walking toward that same goal and having these conversations. At that point, we're able to put together an agreement that is going to set the expectations for the MedSurplus Alliance, for Kids for Life, for Bayer, for the MSROs. And, again, make sure that we are on the same page. We're walking in the same direction. And in the case of Bayer, this looked like a legal agreement. In other cases, this could be a memorandum of understanding. We're really flexible in what that can look like. Then we get to the point where we have our initial donations, and this is really exciting because we start to walk slowly in terms of putting just a few studies into the system and testing and refining the systems we're working with. But it's also an opportunity for the relationships to start to build. And there were so many really heartwarming moments when we were working with Bayer to launch the program because we had that great back and forth where the folks in this case at Hospital Sisters Mission Outreach were able to share their knowledge of how does an MSRO work and what is its role, its niche in the global health community. But also Bayer was able to talk about the products. We had talked about how we didn't know this was a source of surplus product. And going along with that, there were some things that were introduced to us that we didn't have the expert knowledge we wanted. But through the relationship with Bayer, we were able to bring on the experts from their side, and they really patiently went through, all right, this is what this is used for. This is how you can use it in these different circumstances, and really helped us build that expertise that we needed, and through that build that relationship. So when we were offered the lab analyzers, we had that relationship in place where there was that comfort level to say this is a great donation and it can be incredibly useful for our recipients if we had the test strips as well. And that's really what we're trying to to do. And now we're at the point where we are getting the feedback that we need so that way we can make the adjustments to the program. And when I say feedback, not only are we getting feedback from the folks at Bayer, how's the program working for you all? And the feedback from the folks at Hospital Sisters Mission Outreach, how's it working for them? But through those groups, we're able to get to the feedback from the study sites that are contacting us from all over the world, asking how can we convince our sponsors to be part of the Kits for Life program. And we need their feedback because we want to make sure that this is satisfying for them, easy for them, and they are part of this whole team. But through Hospital Sisters Mission Outreach, we're able to get the feedback from the end recipients that are receiving things like the lab analyzers, and find out, well, is this useful? What would be more useful? And we can tie all that together. And with that information, we can put together that big picture of, all right, how do we go from pilot to the full program? And that is, just fantastically exciting for us to see, and working in this, the single circle. So that way we can improve healthcare delivery options for folks throughout the world. And as Georgia pointed out, right here in the United States.
Yeah, Donna, Josh just referenced the feedback that they're getting from the sites. Can you and or Mark walk us through the feedback you got just from the pilot sites, the 200 sites that you guys used for the pilot?
Yeah, the sites, they were thrilled. The general overall feedback was, this is fantastic, a wonderful thing to do, and we don't have to dispose of it. Number two, how easy the portal was. Like you said, Greg, anywhere from 4, 8, 10 hours of breaking down kits. They don't have to do that anymore. They're just putting it in a box, going on the portal, printing out a form. Super easy. And they're just thrilled to be able to be part of something that's going to have such a wonderful impact. One question that constantly came up from all the sites was, can I put other sponsors' kits in your box? Can we get, if those sponsors weren't on board yet? And ultimately, that's the goal we'd like to get to. But for now, we have to say we can't right now because of the liability issues. However, let's convince that sponsor to come on board with Kits for Life. And then that way you can have, those sites can have the option, hopefully, if they're working with numerous sponsors, that they all become members.
Yeah,
we will get there. We
Yeah.
will get there. We will get there to a point where we're solving that problem of getting every kit from a site to an organization that needs them, basically. I'm convinced we're going to get there.
Yeah, I think so too. Both Mark and Donna, I do. I bet the reaction that you got from the sites is similar to what my research nurses, when they first were able to send their first batch out. I'll never forget. They kept saying, "Greg, this destroying these kits, sending them to landfills." Before they said they called it a meaningless act. And they said, we've taken something that's a meaningless act and turning something meaningful. And that's really what their logo represents. We're putting, the heart in a box, and that's life. And we're able to change a life now for something that we were throwing away. I know I talked to a number of MSROs in the past, and they said they were expending so much resources, and just raising funds to buy supplies. And I said, oh no, and we're throwing them away on a weekly basis. And so the relationships and the collaboration and the shared vision and mission is just wonderful to see it into play. And as I understand it, the supplies from your pilots not only went here to the US, but they also made it to Kenya, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes.
for humanitarian aid. Great.
Well, and as you guys were talking, I thought of one uh, one group that benefits from this that maybe we haven't discussed. So I visited labs in Kenya and Haiti and Ecuador and Ghana. And I have met brilliant physicians and scientists who do not have appropriate supplies to do their very best. They certainly have the training, they have, the minds, they have everything that they need, but they don't have the supplies. And when we send supplies, we are really encouraging the professionals in all of these countries. We're actually giving them more confidence in the work they're doing. We're creating a greater level of comfort for them, and we're helping them to do what they do best. So we think about the patients, but sometimes I always want to remind people that we're making a major impact on the professionals working in these low resource countries.
I'm getting quite a few questions. And so you guys know we actually are in 90 countries right now, over
Wow.
3,000 participants. So here's a question I think, Laura, you may want to tackle. How do you report impact back to donors? And I know this was a discussion we've had early on. Actually, I have with every sponsor. The protection of liability, right? The release of liability. And so you've got the delinking process, but it's so enlightening. After I walk them through that, then they go, but can we get pictures of them using our supplies? And I said, well, you can't have it both, because they're so excited, because they're taking something that was thrown away and changing lives. And so if you could, Lori, explain how that works with the reporting back to donating organizations like BEAR.
Sure, absolutely. And Josh, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. So what we do is you've heard references to the reporting tools that we have that are online, and that captures a lot of the transactional information, what's been offered as a donation, whether it was accepted by MSROs, because the MSROs can make the decision whether or not it's a good fit for them and accept or reject a donation. And then the amount, the quantity, when it was donated, that kind of information is easy for us to report back to donors because we're capturing it. We also work with the MSROs who have their own inventory systems, their own reporting systems. And once a quarter, we will ask them to provide reports to us, letting us know a couple things. What did they receive, and how did they record it? But also, if they can, and this is not possible for every donation, but if they can let us know where the product was sent. And so we have a very high level view of it went to, for example, Kenya in the example you heard earlier. But that's not possible for every product, but where we can, we try to capture it. And then we ask them to also ask for photographs from it's been a tough year for photographs because of travel restrictions and others. But in general, we can capture two kinds of photographs. One might be of actually something being used. We did that with COVID here in the US. It was a little more easier this year. And sometimes it'll be really a photograph just generally of the facility and what they do. And so it might not be your specific product, but you would have a sense of the environment and the services that are being provided. And so we sit down, we ask every donor what they're interested in, and we explain what we can do and what we can't do. And then we develop an agreement on, what we will provide for them. And that sometimes we'll actually have very specific stories too. And if we have a story to go with the photograph, then we will share that.
And then, Laura or Josh, can you also take us through, because I know we've talked about clinical trial supplies in general and medical supplies in general. What about those supplies that are either expired or pending expiration? Are those accepted?
It depends on the product, and it depends on the medical surplus recovery organization. So the general rule of thumb is that expired products may not be able to be used, and so they're not accepted. But there are some exceptions. One exception would be there are products that are used by hospitals and training programs and vet programs that don't have to meet the same standard as they would be for a clinical, human situation. And so we would explain what products those are to a donor. There are other products that can be repurposed. So gloves, for example, might be able to, that are no longer usable in a surgical situation, can be taken out of their packaging, put in a box, and be used for cleaning. So there are some exceptions and some strategies. And actually, I would ask, Georgia, if she wants to comment on that and add to what I've just said.
Yeah, you did a great job of sharing that information, Lori. And we regularly, like surgical gloves that have passed their sterility date, we regularly repackage those and send them as clean, non-sterile. And those could be used as exam gloves, and they can be used, as Lori said, for other purposes like cleaning. So that's one item that we repackage. The other thing that's important to note, and this is kind of different from MSR to MSRO to MSRO. A lot of us do what we call hand carry. So we have people that are medical missionaries that will take a small shipment with them when they go in and provide service in a remote location. And if they are going to provide that service, and they're going to be using those supplies during that trip, then we can give them those items that may be going to expire soon. But when we're shipping them to another country, we need a long expiration date. And so, when we're shipping, we require 1 year and 1 day in terms of the expiration date. But for our hand carry recipients, as long as they are letting us know they're going to use those during their trip, we can give them things that are going to expire quickly, knowing they're going to be used before their expiration date.
Greg, if I could just add one more thing, the requirements that we're sharing with you were created originally by the World Health Organization through an extensive process for all the different types of medical donations, whether it be pharmaceuticals or devices or equipment. But also we are always looking at what are the country requirements, because countries have been taking important steps themselves to try to ensure that the products coming into their country are not going to become a burden, as Georgia was describing. And so sometimes the requirements will vary country by country as well. And that's one important benefit of working with an accredited MSRO. They're going to, pay attention to that and make sure that you're also working in alignment with what the country's health system is trying to accomplish.
Oh, that leads right into a question that just popped up, Lori and Georgia. It says, how physicians from countries in need can contact the organization or program. So it sounds like we do have a number of organizations or humanitarian aid organizations. This one looks like it's run by physicians. They're saying they need help. They would like to participate. What should they do?
Lori, you want to take that one? Because you've got us all listed on your website.
That's right. If you go to medsurplusalliance.org, there's a couple of options. One option is to just send me a note through the info. It'll say if you want to request supplies or if you want to donate supplies, you can just click and we'll get that note. The other is to take a look at each of the medical surplus recovery organizations that are accredited. We have a web page for that. And in some cases, you might prefer to start with one versus another because of either where they're geographically located, or they may have a special focus in the country that you're with, or the type of organization that usually you partner with, for example. But I'm more than happy to try to help sort that out for you and get you connected with the right organization. Answer your questions.
And I would just add too, Greg, any of your listeners are more than welcome to approach us directly. We're at mission-outreach.org, and we have an online application, so people can start the process by submitting an application, and we will get back to them, or they can give us a call or shoot us an email. And we love to get new recipients, and we have a great team that will treat everyone very well. And I know that we'd be able to meet many needs if we had some additional recipients.
And more clinical trial supplies, right?
Yes, yes.
Greg, I'd like to, one thing I'd like to add is that one of, I think, the great benefits of the Kids for Life program is creating vehicles to connect people. And what we've seen already is that pharmaceutical companies are contacted by health systems, hospitals, ministries of health in need. And through this program at the MedSurplus Alliance, we're able to connect those folks with accredited MSROs, medical surplus recovery organizations, to explore their needs. But beyond that, we were talking about hand carries a few minutes ago. Many of the medical surplus recovery organizations equip the hand carry or have hand carry programs to equip the medical aid teams that are going to low resource settings. And through Kids for Life, we're also able to connect those folks, sometimes at the pharmaceutical companies, to an MSRO that will be able to meet their needs and enhance the work of that medical aid team.
Great. Thank you. We just have about 8 minutes left, and there's we've got another question. Donna or Mark, how easy was it to implement? Again, you guys led the charge on the clinical trial supplies from the sites and that. And then also, if you could walk us through, because I know you developed an easy to use onboarding kind of tools that you guys served as almost your own test market for throughout, the 200 plus sites, as well as the monitors that were monitoring those sites and your clinical ops teams. Can you walk us through that, the onboarding tools?
Yeah, so I'll start, and I'll probably not give it nearly the justice it deserves, but I will say that I think the two big things that kind of stick out in my mind that we really had to overcome were the delinking process, as well as the closing the loop of the report about what's going to happen with the donations after they're done, right? So I think those were the two big things that we had to, I say we, and we means Donna, had to do some convincing. I think we were pretty successful. I think that when you walk through the process, I think most sponsor companies are really about assessing the risk that regarding the process, right? And I think people, anybody that's watching now or the recorded event, need to know is that this is new. This is a brand new thing. This has not been around very long from a sponsor perspective. So for us, this was a new process that we had to understand, and we were able to overcome a couple of those obstacles. Very fortunately, I would say, that we were able to implement it as quickly as we did. I'm sure Donna is probably like, that was a lot harder than that, but yes, I'm sure she has some things to add.
I was going to mention the, Greg, I remember that first advisory council meeting we were on, and you asked for a volunteer to take over the work stream for the onboarding documents, which I did volunteer for. And I'm glad I did, because there was some initial documents that were really helpful for me. and trying to put it in place at Bayer, which included overarching guidance. But as we were going to implement, we started adding to it. So even like, the template agreement with hospital sisters, the overarching guidance, and just, your own organization's standard operating procedure that you needed to follow. So everything was still up and up in terms of your SOPs and following guidelines, are because we're so heavily regulated, and putting together an FAQ. When the CRAs were getting trained, we put together an FAQ because all these questions came in. You, Greg, I know, vetted and have a huge FAQ for sponsors who are interested in the program. So we actually have an index now. We probably have about 12 different onboarding documents now, and we're going to walk through it with Lily because they're getting ready for their pilot, and get feedback, and we will be able to finalize everything. I mean, I would say 90% there with the content, but it definitely is going to be very easy for sponsors in terms of a blueprint to give them, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel, and they're going to have clear-cut guidance to move along to implement it.
Great.
And I think that, I know we're getting close to the end, I'm sorry, but
Yep.
I think the important part about that is that, that's the great part about this. And we keep talking about the relationships and sharing. That's the value, right? This is not, we didn't create a proprietary process on how to go through this. And we want to share it because we want more people to be involved.
Yeah, I mean, I love working with you guys and the other sponsors on this. I always say I get a little smarter after every call. I swear. You guys are fantastic at what you guys do, and it's just a different perspective than I've been used to. I've been in clinical trials or clinical research for 20 years, and this just amazes me. Hey, just so you guys know, I'm just looking at the numbers. Over 5,000 people are participating and over 400 comments. This is for Mark and Donna, real quick, because we just have a few more minutes. And what are your KPIs? Are the KPIs most important to you guys? And to you, do you feel for the other founding members? That's a tough one.
That is a tough one. But
because
I
you've
think
just
that,
implemented, yeah.
Yeah, right. It's new. It is very new. But like I said, I mean, I think my ultimate goal is that this becomes just part of the everyday process of what a clinical trial is at Bayer, right? Just like I said, we collect adverse events during clinical trials. We pay clinical trial sites. You do a contract, you do budgets. This is just now part of it. This should now be part of what we do. We're going to repurpose our clinical trial supplies. And I think that, it would be really awesome if we were able to expand that to any other medical or clinical trial supplies that are, that our company touches at some point in time, throughout its history. If we're not going to use it anymore, we should be able to repurpose it.
Great. And then also going forward, right now we've talked about the U.S., sites within the U.S., and equipment within the U.S. Quickly, in just 2 minutes, Donna and Lori, if you guys can walk us through the plans for clinical research sites and those supplies outside of the U.S. From those organizations for repurposing for humanitarian aid.
Yes. So we with all the communication up there with this program and pilot, all the countries were reaching out to me. So I was constantly letting Josh and Lori know. And we are thrilled to have, Greg, through your efforts, an official work stream set up by the Alliance for OUS expansion of Kits for Life. So that's now being funded by Roche, which is wonderful. And now Lori and Josh, as I engage with colleagues outside of the U.S., our Bayer affiliates, Lori and Josh are able to provide some consultation and help make recommendations of reputable MSROs outside the United States. And we're going to be doing some things in parallel. So Lori, if you want to add to that.
Oh, I may pause you, Lori, on that because we're getting ready down to 30 seconds. I want to do our call for action, call to action, which is go to www.kitsforlife.com and or MedSurplus Alliance for more, and definitely for more information if you're interested. It's an amazing program. I really want to thank all our panelists today. You guys have done an amazing job, not only here today, but over the last 2 years. Getting the right supplies in the right hands for the right reason. And in terms of reporting, I believe we've already impacted over 12,000 lives in 8 countries, which is just amazing to me. And I really appreciate that. Plus, Georgia, thank all the volunteers
Cheers. Yes.
who make it all happen. They are so important. Yes, a round of applause to the volunteers to make it all work. And so with that said, I believe we're at the end of our program.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.